Hello and welcome to Audible Anomaly, the podcast where we foster deep and meaningful conversation to help get you through your darkest days. I'm your host, Josh, and in today's episode, we are talking about all things, well, not all things, but a lot of things that can either add or subtract from your lifespan. Should be a very, very interesting episode we have lined up for you. But before we get started, let's catch up with our panel here, I guess. My lovely friends, if you will. Let's toss it over to Davey. How was your week?
My week was weird. It felt like the first half of the week is fine, and then everything compressed down at the end of just like stress and tiredness and all that fun jazz. Because Thursday, Friday, I feel like I couldn't focus and do anything, and it didn't help that on, I guess, Thursday morning, I woke up at 3 a.m. and I couldn't go back to sleep. And so I had spent first 5 hours of my day just kind of doing things, but then not being able to focus because I was tired. So it was a weird 5 hours for me. So it's been a weird week.
For sure. All right, Kev, how about you?
My week was pretty good. Not much happened. I am officially unemployed now. Just because I'm going to start my job, but there's a gap between ending one job, starting the next.
Gotcha.
I think that's really the only thing that happened to me. How about yourself?
Yeah, so it's funny. It seems like there's always at least one person that is unemployed during the filming of this podcast. Because as you go unemployed, I got employed.
Very nice.
I am working once again with Davey, and I witnessed firsthand the loopiness that was his Thursday.
Yeah.
So we're pretty much working together again, carpooling like we were. We're pretty much doing very much the same thing. That I feel like right now, at least, the role is very much what it was when we started. Couple of things added extra, but it is going to change.
I've already started to feel that change, personally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
But it also is because they have been like leading me up for the last couple weeks, and with you coming back in and having to learn like a couple extra things, I think they're not really throwing you into that pool yet. But I'm feeling it now for sure.
Yeah, it's going to be a matter of time before.
Yeah.
So I'm just catching up with things, and week was stressful because had to do taxes because we hadn't done that. So got to file jointly, which didn't take as long as I thought it was going to. Thank you, TurboTax. But also, we had a lot of W-2s and it didn't help their job. For some reason, split up and sent us 2 on top of it. So it's like, I think I ended up having 4 W-2s this year because of that. And then the wifey ended up having 3. And then we got, obviously, unemployment stuff as well. So it's like, it was a lot, but honestly, it wasn't too bad. And then I am wrapping up school as well. So I was trying to push to start on Monday, honestly, but they're like, yeah, we kind of need you like ASAP. So we kind of negotiated Thursday. They wanted, honestly, when I got home on Monday, they wanted me to come in Tuesday. And I'm like, I'm like, hey, I need to get an oil change in my car because it's been way too long. And then I've, like I said, other things I need to take care of, including my final project, which is actually circulates around the podcast. So it's fun, but it's also hectic. So that's pretty much going to be my weekend, even, frankly. But yeah, that was my week. Kind of hectic.
Sounds like it, yeah.
Just a little bit. But got a majority of what I wanted done, so that's all that matters. Alrighty then. With that, let's get into today's topic. Now, as I've mentioned many times on the podcast, I've been working on my Google Data Analytics cert, and toward the end, when one of the courses was based around R, the programming language. In that, they linked us a lot of different data sets and stuff, and it's been throughout the entire course. But within that, I end up stumbling across this kind of meta-analysis, this data visualization of a bunch of different studies that were compiled. They look like this was as recent as 2014, and it takes a look at what really extends lifespan. So they took a ton of different studies that they were able to find. They put them on this list, and it goes from top to bottom, top being the most suggestive, so there might be some correlation, but not necessarily causation. So there might be a relationship where they kind of parallel, but doesn't necessarily mean one causes the other. And then as it goes down, there's stronger and stronger evidence to support it, so that there may be that one causes the other. So that's kind of what this was looking at. Obviously, this isn't all of the potential factors, but this is just what I was able to find in this specific data set, which I'll do my best to try and link below as well, so that way you guys can also take a look at it and see and follow, or not follow along, but kind of just see what we're coming from. And then if you want to look into the studies yourself, you can do that as well. So this isn't necessarily a definitive list. This is just what this data set and what a lot of the science in this data set is pointing at. So that's kind of the disclaimer before we get into the actual thing. But I thought it'd be pretty interesting, since neither of you have actually looked at this data set yet. So I thought it'd be kind of fun, since obviously I had to organize and look at all this stuff, so I kind of know. But I thought it'd be interesting to see what your thoughts as to what factor adds or subtracts the most years to your life. So we'll start with the former. What factor do you guys think adds the most years to your life, and why?
I mean, I'm gonna say exercise.
Exercise?
I think exercise adds the most to your life. Because if we're talking of dying of, obviously, accidents, I think, are outside of all of this, but if you keep your body healthy and your immune system strong through things like exercise, that you will generally live longer, because you can fight more things in your older age.
That makes a lot of sense. I think I'm going to say companionship, like close social interaction, just because that affects mental health. And I'm sure there are some other benefits, but that's my choice.
Right on. Both pretty darn good answers. Let's see here. Yeah, I mean, both of them are pretty good. What do you guys think subtracts the most years to your life?
Substance abuse is going to be my guess.
Substance abuse.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out how to say it, but that's a really good way. I was thinking smoking and drinking or recreational drug use, but substance abuse in general is a great way to phrase it.
I mean, just alone that the fact that they, it's easy to die from drinking at a young age. It's easy to die from recreational and exotic drugs. And then smoking alone just destroys your ability to breathe.
Yeah. And can lead to other things as well.
Yeah.
So
a lot of them can.
Yeah, for sure. So you're going to piggyback off that answer, Kevin?
Exactly. Yeah. Just riding along.
All right. Well, yeah.
I want to honorable mention Broken Heart.
Broken Heart. Can you be maybe less specific?
Well, I'm just saying, I feel like there's been many examples of someone losing someone they love, and almost it's like they've just given up the will to live, and they just seem to leave the world. It's kind of a depressing thing to say, but it also seems like that happens more often than not after a very long tenured relationship with somebody.
I think the more general phrase that he's looking for is loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like it's more than just loneliness.
I mean, I feel like that's a particularly intense loneliness, but still a form of loneliness. So more general.
I feel like it's more of a form of loss.
Mm.
And the loss is what?
Yeah, I'll absolutely contribute that to like losing someone, maybe not necessarily in the world, like they're no longer here, like deceased, but losing them from your life. You know, I can definitely relate to that. It's weird because that's something that I've kind of been dealing with on and off myself throughout the years, and it's like it's almost in a weird way. I don't want to say harder because it's different, but it's weirder because it's a conscious effort of them not being there, and they're still kind of around. Whereas it's like when you're deceased, it's like, okay, that's it. Like there's no coming back from that. Maybe down the road, it's more definitive,
Mm-hmm.
But it's been weird because it's been either through your own fault or not. They're no longer in the picture, and it's just a weird place to be, because it's like you feel like you could have done something differently to change it, even though, especially in my situation, ain't no way in hell. like that was, just to kind of give you some context, the breaking up of my mom and stepdad, like that's nothing I can control, right? But you always feel like you could have done something differently, but realistically, not so much.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah, it's been a weird one. Dealing with that. I know, like I said, going up through, and we'll get into those conversations a little bit later on down the podcast life. But yeah, it's kind of crazy how that all kind of comes together,
Mm-hmm.
That's all right. All right. Before we get started, do you guys have any questions? Any other comments regarding the exercise?
No, I'm just ready to learn how to live longer.
Yeah.
Would you say you're looking forward to living long and prospering?
No, I wouldn't.
No, not at all.
I'm a Wars kind of guy, not Trek.
Yeah, I'm right there. I'm right there with him.
It's funny because the wifey and I'm not going to say they're more Wars, the wifey and her brother, but they definitely watched a lot more Trek throughout. And it's like, well, to be fair, I haven't dabbled with Trek. I've seen a handful of episodes and they're always pretty good. But it's one of those where I personally just haven't sat down and given it a shot, like a real chance,
Yeah.
Fair.
I feel like that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Easier to get into movies than it is to get into TV shows.
Less time and investment.
Yep.
All right. So next week we'll be talking about how we binge watch now. Alrighty. All right. Well, if y'all have nothing, we can go through this. If you want to follow along, it's where to find it. But just to recap, we're starting with the most suggestive. So not necessarily the strongest evidence, but there's at least at minimum some evidence. So this falls into the category. There's pretty much 4 categories. There's there's 4 categories: debated, suggested, good, and strong. For the purposes of this, we're not counting debated because that can go either way. We're at least starting with suggestive in that there may be a link, but maybe some more additional research needs to follow up on it. Just because if we start with debated, then it's like, well, there's no definitive, at least correlation or answer. It can go either way, right? So the sense of this, that's what we're going with. And the very first one that we're going to talk about is too much sleeping. Too much sleeping tends to lose you about a year and a half of life. It's interesting that they're saying that the science suggests that 7 hours is ideal, no more than 8 hours a night. I don't know about you, but 7 hours of sleep is the worst spot for me because I feel it's right in between my REM cycles, and I just end up becoming like I end up getting so groggy with 7 hours of sleep. 6 or 8, I'm fine. 7, always been a trouble area for me.
That's interesting. See, 7 is what I normally get. I'm pretty happy about it.
I remember something about sleep cycles being that they're like, there's something to have to do with like threes. That these cycles follow the rule. I forget whether it was 3 hours or maybe it was like 30 minutes or something like that. But there is a key point of waking up within that. There's a lot of apps that will track your cycles and wake you up at like the perfect time, which I've used before and it actually really helps. But I'm with you, Kevin. I'm normally getting 6 to 7 hours of sleep. 7 being when my body says it's time to wake up.
Yeah, I tend to be, especially more recently, kind of because of unemployment and stuff. I end up getting a lot more than that because I can. But even before then, I was always try to hit at least or around 8 hours. Just like I said, because 7 for me is for some reason, at least in my sleep cycles, I just wake up so groggy and so out of it.
It doesn't help with alarm clocks. Alarm clocks actually are just not good for waking up. I mean, they wake you up, but just for the good feeling of waking up, alarm clocks are the worst way.
I don't know where I got my strategy for waking up, but what I found myself doing is that I'll set like 3 alarms. So I'll set one like 7:30 and then 7:45 and then 8. Why? I don't know. I feel like it's like a failsafe for me. But there was a time where I was really spreading that out even further than that.
Yeah, I'm 2 alarms. One at the time I need to wake up and the one 30 minutes before. Because I
think that's where I am now. Just because I'm too lazy to set more. But there was a minute where it was 3 at least 30 minutes apart, if not 45 minutes apart.
Wow.
For some reason. I don't know why.
I have my most vivid dreams between those 2 periods, so that's why I like it the most. It's when I remember my dreams the most.
I don't use alarms anymore. I haven't used alarms like a year and a half now.
Are you just counting on your body's internal clock?
Yeah, exactly. And it almost always works. There was one that was running a little bit late, but no big deal.
I hope this new job doesn't require you to drive in.
Oh, it does.
Ooh.
Oh.
Good luck, sir.
Thanks. I have time to adjust.
That's fair. So additional kind of notes on the too much sleeping before we move on to the next one. Averaging more than 8 hours of sleep a night will increase your chance of dying within 6 years by 13 to 15% than if you average 7 hours a night. 7 hours of sleep equals the safest, in quotes. But sleeping for 5 hours a night is less risky than 8. The average sleep time in the Western world is now 6.5 hours.
Here's a question for you. What is there like a specific age that they're calculating this? Because I know younger folks need more sleep in their development.
Let me take a look.
I assume this is for adults. Because I know like teenagers, they need like 8 to 9 to 10 hours of sleep for their good growing bodies. And obviously babies sleep for like 23 hours.
Yeah, let me take a look. I think this was specifically looking at insomnia patients, potentially.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'd have to do more digging. I have the link,
Okay.
but
I think it's safe to say this is for adults.
Probably.
I'm gonna assume a lot of these are for adults, unless otherwise specified. That's gonna be my base assumption at this point. Yeah, because there's only a handful of them that might not be, but they're noted. Yeah, at least this one in the notes doesn't quite say, but you can. So we can always look more into that, or we'll provide the link that way you guys can look at it too. So we'll go with that. But moving on. Oh, apparently some of these are also sex specific.
Hmm.
So kind of interesting. The second one on our list is having more optimism. And this is specifically for females. So, oh, come on. Let's see. Women within the highest 25% of optimism scores had a 9% lower chance of developing heart disease and a 14% lower chance of dying of any cause. Women with the highest degree of cynical hostility were 16% more likely to die than those with the most trust in their fellow humans. So
Interesting.
So females having more faith in fellow human beings and being more optimistic gives you a higher chance of living further. And the approximate gain is about 2 additional years.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's very...
It's
Very-
interesting that it is female specific. You know?
I don't know if that was because that's how the study was designed, which is very possible, I think, in this case.
Hmm.
So they can't necessarily speak on behalf of men since they weren't included in this study, I think. But there's at least that link of...
Because I feel like with being more optimistic, you generally feel less stress, generally less anger, and I think a lot of negative emotions tend to pump more stuff, especially a lot more chemicals in your brain, a lot more bad chemicals, and a lot more like rising blood pressure. I know it would probably be a problem with a lot of anger and cynicalness. Not a word, but you know what I mean.
Pessimism, perhaps?
Pessimism. Yeah. And I think rising blood pressure alone tends to be a good cause of heart conditions and heart attacks and stuff like that. So I feel like that's, unless there's something within the genetic code of males that help with regulating that, I feel like it's probably both genders, or both male and female.
It does look like this was specifically looking at women and heart disease. So,
Got it.
That's specifically why. At least this study is, hey, we can only speak for this, but it could correlate to males as well. At least in this case, cortisol is the hormone for stress, I believe. That is a doozy. Tell you that from experience. All right. The next one is specific to males. Let's see. Let's see if there's any reason why. Not necessarily, but having more professional responsibility can lead to 3.5 years gained. So this specifically looked at aged 65 males. This was an older study from 2002 to 2006. They classified them classified by occupation as higher managerial and professional. The life expectancy was 18.8 more years compared to 15.3 years for those assigned to occupations that are classified as routine. So they're able to gain 3.5 years just because they were in a higher managerial and professional role.
Interesting. That goes the opposite of what I thought it would be. I would think that with the more professional, more managerial jobs, you would have more stress.
To be fair, again, because it is looking at an older demographic, I'm wondering if because they've had to be in that profession for a lot longer, they've developed coping mechanisms and other things that might help.
It might correlate with something that's further down on the list here. More money, less problems?
That could make sense. Absolutely.
Very, very possible. Very possible. Alrighty. Moving on. And this one is living in the city. On average, you're expected to lose 2.5 years. This doesn't matter the sex. This is for both. And it is a Canadian study. According to Canada's McMaster, according to the McMaster University's study, just living next to a busy road can knock 2.5 years off your life due to increased exposure to traffic air pollution. Yeah. Okay. I know there's also something with living within, I think, a mile of a major freeway is very similar as well.
Makes sense.
Both noise and air pollution from the traffic. So.
Well, good luck to you and I, Josh.
Well, see, joke's on you because I'm planning on using the next one to my advantage, and that is moving to the country. Living in the country, the countryside, you can gain 8 years on your life. So, countryside dwellers have a life expectancy of 84 years as opposed to 76 for townies.
Interesting.
And that was part of that same study from McMaster University in Canada. Yeah, that's compared to living next to a busy road. So you and I are both kind of SOL for now, but if we don't live next to a busy road, then we're fine. All right. Moving on to the next one. This one's interesting. Eating less food. You can gain up to 11.67 years. So almost over 11.5 years. Apparently, 30% less calories increased primate and rat life. Assumes humans could be affected the same way as the monkeys. Shown to increase rhesus monkeys' lifespans by 10 to 20%, which is about 4 years in their lifespan. The most striking extension of lifespan occurs when put on a diet from birth.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it looks like they just took that 10 to 20% and then just added it to the average, human lifespan.
That makes sense.
So there could be some correlation, and this is why it's in the suggestive category. The next one, this one blew me away, but also it's still in the suggestive category. Spending more time with women. It can gain you 15 years, potentially, and is tied with another one that we'll get to later for being the potential most years gained.
It's a good one for sure.
And this one's for sex male.
This one is for males specifically. Although we'll get to female in a little bit. So this study found a significant positive relationship between a man's life expectancy and the sex ratio of the secondary school he attended, i.e., higher percentage of females. Found that the average white American male who was 65 in 1993 could expect to live another 15 years having spent time around women at school. That is crazy. It's a good thing that I was raised around women.
I suppose so. Yeah.
Well, you know what they say: men are dumb, and a group of men are dumber. So, I mean, I think even I feel like even no matter how you kind of identify or your sexual orientation, I think hanging out with the opposite sex is always a good idea because it's kind of you gain different perspectives because of how your body is set up. You know what I mean? And your genetic code and the way you kind of perceive the world. So I think helps looking at those different ideas and helps you develop healthy habits.
Yeah.
That's what I pull it to.
It's very, very likely.
I tend to be happier hanging out with women and overall. So, I mean, makes sense.
See how it is. Don't want to hang out with me?
It's the long hair, Kevin. That's why I want to hang out with you. Yeah.
Works for me.
No, but you know what I mean. Like even if you don't identify, like obviously, I can only speak from my sexual identity, but I like hanging out with women, and maybe that's just because I am a straight white male. But you know what I mean.
Yeah,
I get you.
I mean, for me, I just find more comfort because, like, hanging out with women, like even the wifey, especially, just because that's what I'm used to, because that's what I grew up around. You know, had my mom, had my grandma, had my aunt, had her 2 daughters growing up, and then when they moved out, it was a mother and her daughter. So it's like I've always been around women, so that's normal to me, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
All right, moving on. Being more conscientious and stable can add 2.5 years. So, traits that mark people as conscientious, which is thinking things through before acting, being dependable and following through on their commitments, adopting conventional norms of morality, and being neat and orderly, seems to have a positive correlation as opposed to those who take risks. Which,
when you phrase it like that, it makes a whole lot of sense.
right? Yeah, like the way they specified in their definition of it. I mean, yeah, hard not to be, really. Like that just means that you're thinking of every potential variable and such.
Yeah.
So there is another one that is not on this list, but is decently studied, still in the suggestive category. But I thought this was the closest one that it could kind of correlate into. And it's more meditation, so meditating more. This includes yoga and Tai Chi. Specifically, when we talked about yoga, obviously there's been a more workoutification of it lately, where you're seeing like hot yoga and like trying to like burn more calories and things like that, which I mean is great. Exercise is good. Or is it? We'll find out. But using yoga as a relaxation exercise seems to reduce health risks, especially in older people. This could potentially gain you 12 years on your life. And this is looking at a specific study of 2,000 seniors that found those who did relaxation exercises daily had 87% fewer heart attacks than is normal for their age group. They had 55% fewer cancerous tumors and 87% fewer nervous disorders. So I think that would include something like Alzheimer's. Would that be a nerve disorder? Or is that brain neurological?
Neurological, definitely. Neurodegenerative, I think, is actually what it specifically is.
Officially, yeah. But very interesting. So we will definitely be doing yoga and Tai Chi once we get up there in age. All right. Moving on to the next one. This is for us males again. Apparently, orgasming more can potentially gain you 4 years of life. It is a very weird study, but the typical man who has about 350 orgasms a year versus the national average of a quarter of that lives about 4 years longer. And more than those extra 4 years, more than those extra 4 years, the men will feel 8 years younger than their contemporaries. So you not only live longer, but you'll feel younger.
Well, they do say that male self-pleasure is a great way to prevent prostate cancer. So
I have heard that before.
So I mean that'll absolutely increase your life if you don't get cancer.
That is true.
And I mean, obviously, it's a good time feeling. It is a pleasurable experience for everyone, and so when you feel good, you generally want to try and live longer, and you generally kind of feel younger. I feel like more optimistic people, more happy people tend to act younger or express more younger qualities.
Sure, I'll agree with that.
Yep. Here, folks. Masticate more. Actually, less. Wait, what?
Chew less?
30% less.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, you could chew the food a whole lot more.
just
make it feel like a long meal.
It'll make you feel fuller. No. Alrighty, we'll move on. The next one in this category, this goes for both sexes, is having more close friends. So if you have more close friends, the average years you could potentially gain is 5.3 years. So there is a strong correlation. People with stronger social relationships had a 50% increase likelihood of survival than those with weaker social relationships. Loneliness is as bad for you as smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Wow.
Jeez. So it kind of ties into the loneliness, the broken heart syndrome to an extent here. But that's kind of crazy that it's as bad for you as 15 cigarettes a day. Like that.
Yeah. So how many cigarettes are in a pack? Like, is this a pack a day? Is this more than a pack a day?
You're asking the wrong people.
I realize, but I don't know.
What was it, like 12? Probably like 12.
12? I could see 12.
12 makes sense.
20.
Oh.
20.
In the US, a pack of cigarettes can't contain fewer than 20 cigarettes, which is the average.
Okay, so almost a pack a day.
12 made sense to me, honestly. But apparently 20. And if we're wrong, please correct us, because we don't know.
Obviously.
Because you'd be asking the wrong people. But yeah. All right, we'll move on. This one's the randomest of them all to me, I feel. This is specifically for males, but apparently engaging in polygamy can net you and gain you 9.3 years of life. So apparently the study indicates about a 12% increase compared to the average lifespan.
I guess it makes sense. When you're spending less time trying to hide your side piece, you generally tend to be less stressful.
I mean, that's one way to look at it.
No, that is an interesting thing. And maybe it correlates with spending more time around women?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are a couple things on here that could work out with.
Yeah. I mean, there is one down the road that kind of makes sense as well, but we'll get to that and we'll touch on that when it comes. The next one here is having greater faith, aka going to church more. This is for both, but especially women, apparently. You can gain 7 years of life. So the research conducted partly at the University of Colorado Boulder found that regular churchgoers live longer than people who seldom or never attend worship services. Life expectancy beyond age 20 averages another 55.3 years to around age 75 for those who never attend church. It's compared to another 62.9 years at age 83 for those who go to church more than once a week. Oh, okay, gotcha. They worded that very poorly. So not going to church, it's 55.3 years. If you go to
Beyond
church,
age 20.
Right, beyond age 20. And if you attend church, it's 62.9 years. If you go at least once a week. At least that is what the study showed.
I mean, there's a lot of good things about regularly attending a church, right? You having faith in something, right? Kind of puts your mind at ease in a lot of things. Like finding your truth in the world puts your mind at ease. There's a sense of community. There's a sense of camaraderie. You know, generally speaking, churches are a happy place, right? There's no negativity. Optimism lives within churches quite often, or at least good churches. You know, it generally is good for the mentality of people. It's why faith is so widespread.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like, it could definitely tie into having more stronger social relationships, which, as we discussed earlier, can definitely help survival for sure. Yeah. I mean, it makes, especially us being social creatures, makes a ton of sense. Yeah. And moving on to the last one here in the suggestive, so the speculative, if you will, but some evidence toward it. Sitting down will lose you 3 years. So next week we will all be standing.
Okay, so hold on.
Welcome to Standing Anomaly, the podcast where we stand up for now. It apparently looks like no matter how much you exercise, sitting too much raises your risk of death. Regardless of whether you're exercising for 5 hours a week, the fact that you're sitting for the rest raises the risk of death. You can't outrun your desk job. Compared to 4 hours per day of sitting, mortality rates for 4 to 8 hours of sitting a day were 3.96% higher. 8 to 11 hours of sitting a day was 28% higher, and 11 plus was about 68.57% higher, regardless of the amount of exercise done.
That really picks up.
Yeah. It kind of escalates and snowballs.
Are y'all rethinking your entire life right now? Like me? I feel like I'm just like rolling through my day in my head right now, and I realize I sit a lot, and when I'm not sitting, I'm laying down.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a combo sitting standing desk, so after this podcast is recorded, I'm just gonna, use that for the rest
Understandable.
of the day.
Understandable.
Yeah. So that wraps up the suggestive section, right, where there may be a possible correlation. There are a couple of other ones that fall in that category, but they're tied to a couple other things. So we'll kind of dance around it a little bit, since just I wanted to group things that made sense together. because there were a couple of them that weren't on the actual data visualization. So just wanted to kind of group them as made sense. So moving on here, we're going to get into there's a good scientific correlation, and this is more pets. This looked at this specific one that is in the good category, looked at cats specifically. So cats, according to the study by the Minnesota Stroke Institute, that followed more than 4,000 cat owners over 10 years, owning a cat can dramatically reduce a person's chance of dying from heart disease. Specifically, people who own cats were 30% less likely to suffer a heart attack. It has also been found that pets in general can help older people and patients recovering from major illness. There was another study that looked at dogs specifically, and both of these were around an additional 3 years of life that you'll gain. But dog ownership is associated with longer life, especially among heart attack and stroke survivors, very similar to the cat, which suggests that it could be just a pet thing. Having that kind of extra responsibility and companionship might help out. But researchers reviewed patient data of over 3.8 million people taken from 10 separate studies for a composite meta-analysis study and found dog owners experienced 24% reduced risk of all-cause mortality, 65% reduced risk of mortality after a heart attack, 31% reduced risk of mortality due to cardiovascular-related issues. The lower risk of death associated with dog ownership could be explained by an increase in physical activity and the decrease of depression and loneliness. Very interesting. Having pets apparently is good.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. All right. Gentlemen, I'm afraid we need to pack it up because apparently red meat, it loses you 1 year of life. I love my
I'll
steak.
take the year.
I'll sacrifice a year. I'm good. I can live with losing a year.
Yep. So again, a good link here. But the risk of dying in a given year increases by 13% if the diet has high red meat content. Argues that eating a burger has the equivalent life-shortening effect to smoking 2 cigarettes a day. And that's assuming A, high red meat, B, you're eating a lot of it. So, in moderation, you're fine. Just substitute the other white meats every now and again and chicken. You'll be good.
Well, to be fair, I do eat a lot of chicken.
Yeah.
It's easier to cook.
Fair.
It's easier to work into a lot of dishes.
Pretty much. I love ground chicken. Just, to be fair, this is completely off topic, but ground meats in general are actually easier for your body to digest. Because
that
they're
makes sense.
So that's why I try to go for ground forms. Or now that I have a grinder, start grinding my own meats. But yeah. Okay, moving on. This is the other one that is honestly kind of obvious. I'm going to group the next two.
These next two, so obvious.
I'm going to group the next two. But I think what was more interesting is that they don't necessarily take away life in the inverse. They just add life, which is kind of interesting. So the next one is avoiding cancer. If you're able to avoid cancer, you pretty much potentially gain 15 years of life. Shocking. I know. I'm just surprised that it's not like cancer reduces life. It's more of like if you avoid it, you gain it. Which, two sides of the same coin, I get it.
It's hard to calculate the life you lose from cancer because generally you get cancer. I mean, we have come a long strides over the last 20 years in overcoming cancer, but there was a point in time, if you got cancer, it was adios, my friend. And you could get it at any time, any year, any age.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that makes sense. It's easier to research people who have not died of cancer than people who've died of cancer and how much they could have lived. So I guess that does make sense.
That study may change if you do it today because there's so many more cancer survivors.
Mm-hmm.
That you could correlate getting cancer. How much does it reduce your life? But it also depends when the study was done and what our mortality rate of cancer was at the time.
Oh, this is an older study. This is a much older study. 89 to 91, direct from the CDC.
Yeah, that 30 years ago.
Yeah.
We've come a long way in cancer treatment.
So this could potentially be even more now. But the second one is avoiding heart disease. You can gain 13 years of life. And let me read off the blurbs. So for cancer, the gain of life expectancy at birth for those individuals who have died of cancer is about 15 years. The gains in life expectancy due to the elimination of cancer as a cause of death are then 3.35 years at birth and 3.12 years at age 50. This gain in life is this is a gain of life expectancy spread across the whole population, though. So, yeah, pretty interesting. And then eliminating heart disease would increase life expectancy at birth by nearly 13 years for those who would otherwise have died of heart disease. Elimination of heart disease would increase life expectancy at birth by nearly 5 years for the whole population, i.e. a person aged 50 would expect to live an additional 4.63 years if heart disease were eliminated as a cause of death. Sounds very interesting. Like I said, pretty obvious, but still something to look out for. I'm trying to avoid as best you can. But no, if it does happen, not the end. These are numbers from early 90s, so I'm sure that has changed a crap ton since. All right, we'll move on to the next one. The next one has 2 additional ones tied to it, and this is specifically looking at alcohol. So, heavy abuse of alcohol can lose you around 11 years of life, i.e., a lot is bad. Alcoholism reduces life expectancy by about 10 to 12 years. This was a study that was published in the New York Times. However, The Guardian suggests that both a little alcohol and a little wine might be okay, particularly to men. At least that's who the study was looking at specifically. So you could potentially gain 2 years by consuming less than 2 units of alcohol a day, roughly just under 1 pint of lager, against someone who completely abstains from drinking it. So that's for alcohol. For wine, you can gain 5 years by consuming 2 units of wine a day, or half a glass, around 175 milliliters, against those who abstain from drinking it as well. So you can gain 5 years on just a little bit of wine every day. Because I know there's that red wine helps with like heart health and all that stuff. But it's interesting that there's actually at least a quantity tied to it. It's not very much. Although, having a pint every day, I'm surprised that actually could potentially give you extra years. All right, moving on. This one, again, we're still in the pretty good category, but having more health checks can give you not very much life, but it could give you 0.14 years is the official metric. And this is specifically looking at preventative health screening of 30 to 49-year-olds. So we should take a note here because we'll be there soon. Preventative health screening and consultation in primary care in 30 to 49-year-olds produce significantly better life expectancy without extra direct and total costs over a 6-year follow-up period. So, to be fair, I feel like a lot of health complications start to really manifest themselves in that time frame. Like we started looking out for prostate cancer. For me, I got to look out for hemochromatosis, which is high iron, starting around 40. So it's like, I feel like that's where your body is like starting to really age. You have women going through menopause, and so I feel like there's a lot of really important things to start looking out around that. Always good to be conscious at any point, but that's when you really start seeing those like long-term things that like could potentially affect you down the road. All right, moving on. And thank goodness for this one. Having a good marriage. So getting married, having a good marriage, you could gain 10 years of life potentially, which is very interesting that by being polygamist, you actually lose 0.7 technically. By comparison, you don't gain as much. So it's weird that those aren't tied together, but also like, I mean, I'll take it. Very, very happy with.
What if you have multiple marriages?
And that's what polygamy is. Polyamory is multiple loves.
Mm.
I think, were you referring to getting married, divorcing, and then marrying again?
No, I was referring to polygamy. I didn't know if that was what it was pointing towards with more wives.
This was looking at just single.
A monogamous relationship?
A monogamous, marriage. So having a spouse can decrease your risk of dying from cancer as much as knocking 10 years off of your life. Single people spend longer in the hospital and have a greater risk of dying after surgery. I'm wondering how much of that is tied to like the will to live and having something to live for, etc. So kind of circling back to the social aspect of things. But yeah, that's very interesting. Happy to know I automatically gained 10 years. Woohoo.
I don't know if that's how that works.
Definitely not.
That's how I see it.
Okay.
Let me take my win, okay?
All right.
All right. The next is, and I could always make the joke of, now that I'm married, I'm not going to benefit from this one. Not true. More money. 5 to 7 years potentially gained. This looks at, on average, poor people. Looks like this was a study in the UK. Poor people in the UK become ill and die 5 to 10 years earlier than their more privileged counterparts. In effect, aging more quickly. So kind of socioeconomic status and not being able to afford better foods and better health care can affect life, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Very obvious, but also not, but also kind of correlation there. Alrighty, moving on. This one is for all you females out there. Don't think we forgot about you, because while males benefit from hanging out with women or females, you automatically gain 5.1 years for being female. Apparently, the average life expectancy is 5.1 years more than it is than males. So females automatically potentially live longer, which we've seen, and especially in some cases can be very obvious. I remember shortly after I found this study, the wifey had showed me like this BuzzFeed article of like, this is why women live longer. It's like a bunch of men doing a bunch of dumb stuff. It's like,
sounds about right.
Yep. Sounds about right. But Alrighty, that is going to wrap up the good category for good strength of evidence. Now we have the very strong evidence here. And the first one, which I'm not surprised by, is mental illness. You could lose potentially 25 years of life if you suffer from a mental illness. Studies found that those with severe mental illnesses are 2 to 3 times more likely to having chronic medical conditions and have a 25-year shorter life expectancy on average than the general population, which kind of makes sense, especially from what we're talking about with last week, where David, I believe it was you, who mentioned how one thing can lead to another.
Yeah.
So, very, very, very crazy, especially like I mentioned, stress manifests itself so differently and severely in different people, you know? Moving on to the next one, obesity. You can lose 8.5 years of life. In a U.S. study, 18-year-old male or 18-year-olds with BMI above 35 had a life expectancy reduced by 5 to 12 years depending on race, sex, and whether or not the person smoked. Largest reduction in life expectancy occurred for white male smokers. It's a good thing that's not us.
Yeah.
Speaking of smokers, smoking. There is a obviously strong correlation of smoking leading to less life, and it is quantified by about 10 years. So it's interesting because it kind of goes both ways in that you'll gain life if you quit smoking, but you'll lose life if you continue to smoke. And it kind of goes by, so it's 10 years gained against those who continue to smoke if you quit smoking between the ages of 25 and 24. That's weird.
Just by 25, I think.
Of 25, yeah. Oh, I see it again. Worded really weirdly here. 5 years gained if you quit smoking between the ages of 45 and 59. So they say, yeah. If combined with exercise and eating healthy, however, those who quit smoking before they turn 35 can gain most, if not all, of that decade back. Even those who wait until middle ages can kick the habit and add about 5 years back to their life expectancy. So you are able to turn around if you're able to quit, which is definitely good if that is something that you're striving for. You know?
Yeah.
To know that it's not all lost. You can still get some years back. The next one is healthy eating, and that you can gain 7 years. So apparently this looks at a couple of diets, the more popular ones for what is quote unquote healthy. Japanese and Mediterranean diets, just because they tend to have the highest level of life expectancy or life span. So a diet comprising 1/3 less than the recommended 2,300 calories and meals including fish, vegetables, and soy products was cited as the reason for high life expectancy of the Japanese island of Okinawa, which the world's highest number of people over 90 live. When looking at the Mediterranean diet, and people's age 70 to 90 eating Mediterranean style diet and greater physical activity are associated with 65 to 73% lower rates of all-cause mortality, as well as mortality due to CHD, CVD, and cancer. So cardiac health disease, cardiovascular disease? Or
Sure.
those sound correct.
Yeah.
But you're more likely to be better if you follow the Mediterranean diet and are a little bit older in age. So Very interesting. I know Okinawa is one of the big ones that a lot of people are trying to study just because they have so many people that live long in that region. All right. The next one. Coupled with healthy eating, a lifestyle of non-smoking, exercising, and healthy eating can potentially gain you 14 years. A study of 20,244 men and women aged 45 to 79 found that 4 health behaviors, non-smoking, physical activity, or physically active, healthy eating, and moderate alcohol intake, has an estimated impact on mortality equivalent to 14 years in chronological age. So, makes sense. You take care of your body, give it a little bit of alcohol, even a decent amount of alcohol. It's moderate alcohol intake. You'll be good. The next one, I don't know if... Oh, this was... Yeah, so having good genetics. There isn't necessarily a range because it can vary, but there's a large potential for a gain, assuming you have siblings who live long. So if your siblings live to 100, you are more likely to do the same. So they said it was a 95% chance likely that so many of their siblings sharing these was not exactly simply an accident of chance. They said it's clear to us that longevity has a genetic component. Frequently, if there is one sibling who has lived to be 100, there will be a second or third sibling who will also live to be 100. So, strong correlation of decent genetics, decent life.
Yeah, makes sense.
Very much so. All right. Next one is exercise. I have 2 here. We have more exercise and a little exercise. More exercise can gain you 4 years of life. Researchers from the National Cancer Institute, Harvard Medical School, they showed that lots of physical activity combined with frequently eating nuts, not eating meat, maintaining a stable weight can lengthen your life by 1.5 to 2.5 years. In a large U.S. study, brisk walking for 450 minutes plus a week increased life expectancy by 4.5 years compared to those who did not do the activity. Being active, having physical activity level at or above what the WHO recommends, a minimum of 150 minutes of brisk walking per week, was associated with an overall gain of life expectancy of 3.4 to 4.5 years. And for even just doing a little exercise, so activities like gardening, walking, dancing in a non-vigorous, leisurely way for 10 minutes to an hour per week was associated with an 18% lower risk of death compared to people who did nothing. That equates to about 2 years of life gained when it's all said and done. So even if you're not doing a crap ton, just do a little bit. Don't sit down so much. Take those 10 minutes to walk.
Makes sense.
And you'll at least gain some life.
Yeah, these last few just haven't been very surprising. This is like common sense stuff.
Yep. Common sense stuff, yet it's also so interesting how a lot of, at least myself, don't apply this entirely.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been working on the exercise, but, and the healthy eating. But I don't smoke, so that's good. I have that going for me. I have no idea about good genetics, though.
I already know that I'm running against the grain with the good genetics part, so.
Fair. The last one, living at high altitude. You can gain half a year to 3.6 years. There is a strong correlation here for both, but especially for men. So, compared to living at sea level, it's about half a year to 2.5 years for women and 1.2 to 3.6 years for men. And a reason also kind of makes sense. Lower oxygen levels turn on certain genes and we think those genes may change the way heart muscles function. They may also produce new blood vessels that create new highways for blood flow into the heart. Also, increased solar radiation at altitude helps the body better synthesize vitamin D, which has also been shown to have beneficial effects on the heart and some kinds of cancer. Mountain village residents had lower death rates and lower rates of death from heart disease than their peers in the lowlands. Concluded that high altitude enables the body to cope with lower levels of oxygen and made a healthier heart. That's very fascinating.
Yeah, that one was a little bit surprising. But also when you look at like how high-end athletes tend to train in the mountains or just high altitudes, kind of makes sense.
Yeah, because one of the things is, especially as you are working out and stuff, your muscles and your body tends to start losing the ability to get oxygen in, right? So if you're better able to cope with lower levels of oxygen, you're able to go for longer. That much kind of makes sense, right? And I could get my things kind of wrong, but that's the gist of it, right? You're able to go for longer and build more endurance when you train at high altitude. That's why you see a lot of, like you mentioned, a lot of athletes training in higher altitudes. The other thing that I thought was pretty interesting was I didn't realize, because we live on the coast and because we're used to living, at sea level or just above sea level, I didn't realize how like half of the middle of America is at least 3,000 feet or higher. Like how much of it is actually high altitude.
Mm.
I only realized that when I did Route 66. I'm like, what? Like Santa Fe itself is like, what, 7,000? It's up there. It's like crazy. It might be even more than that. Actually, I think Albuquerque was about 7,000. But yeah, it never dawned on me again because I'm used to living on the coast. But yeah, that part was kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, that wraps up how to live a longer life. Pretty much just got to live healthily and avoid cancer.
Yeah, a lot of these were obvious. There's a couple of them that were like, especially in the more suggestive category.
Hang out with women. That's the one that threw me quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was interesting. I don't know. I just, be good to your body and your body will be good to you. And, be born with the right genes.
Pretty much.
Some of these are definitely out of control, or out of your control.
Yeah.
Good to know, but not helpful.
I didn't make the choice to start smoking. You know what I mean? It chose me.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's the same thing, especially like avoid cancer and avoid heart disease. Well, yeah. I don't seek those things out. But yeah.
It sucks that this bottle of alcohol is addicted to me. Alrighty. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of just reinforces the, hey, do good, be good.
Yeah.
Which
what do our friends have to say about all this?
Yeah, so the question for this week, I pretty much did the same thing I did with y'all, and that I asked them, hey, what do you think are some factors that add and subtract life? So we got a couple of responses this week. We will go through them, and if you want to join the conversation, you can always find us at Audible Anomaly on all the socials, and you can always send us an email at audibleanomaly@gmail.com, especially if you have any questions that you'd like to see answered. So we will get on with it. And our audience responses here, starting with Kelly. She said, for adding, I believe being active and eating healthy definitely adds more years to your life, and you would be correct. Approximately 15 years. 14 years, I believe it was. In terms of subtracting, socioeconomic status and smoking. Imagine having a pre-existing condition or a health emergency, and you can't afford the healthcare needed to help. I mean, when you think about it that way, absolutely makes sense. And smoking, obviously, you could eventually lead to cancer and among other harmful conditions. So again, it makes perfect sense. It makes it a lot harder to avoid cancer and heart disease and lung cancer and all these other things, you know?
Yeah,
So
she was right on both ends. She hit him on the head.
Yeah.
Spot on. Jeezy hit us up with what he thinks contributes to subtracting life. You know, considering you and I have very similar stomach issues, all I'm saying is that it can help, especially those waves.
Yeah, I think being healthy is a good way to live longer.
Definitely doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
The photographer, he said, adds mental health. Your mentality is what keeps you going. Great way to look at it. And subtracts stress. It can lead to bad habits. And while obviously this isn't the end all be all of things that can contribute it, stress, I can imagine, is going to definitely be up there for detracts.
Yeah.
And because, like he mentioned, it can lead to alcoholism or smoking or, you know, not doing good things to your body, like becoming obese or even worse. So
it's also a lot of strain on your body. Generally speaking, when you're stressed, your body tends to kind of overwork itself in a lot of situations.
Yeah.
Stress can lead to activating that fight or flight response, which can
anxiety.
cause a lot of problems in the end. You were speaking about last week, the fight or flight response hitting, and then you being awake all night or being super tired because the endorphin is just pumping through your brain.
Mm-hmm. Well, the adrenaline, endorphins is good.
Yes. That's what I said. I don't know what you're talking about. Clearly, everyone heard me wrong.
I just, I had to reinforce what you were saying just to be sure. They got it at home.
Right. Uh-huh.
Or wherever you may be listening to this or watching this. But the last one, aspiring fate for subtracts stress, drinking, and smoking, which not entirely wrong. I mean, pretty much right there as well. So
interesting that most people were putting subtracts instead of adds, because I feel like we get preached more about what is more likely to kill you than what is more likely to let you live longer.
Yeah, but a lot of the things that help you live longer weren't necessarily things you can control.
Well, I feel like the things that were specifically like, this will help you live the longest was eat good, exercise, live a healthy life.
Eat good and exercise.
Yeah.
I put commas. Eat good, exercise, live a healthy life.
Moderate alcohol consumption.
And have lots of sex.
Yes.
And lots of
with a dedicated
orgasms.
partner.
Hold on.
Spouse, yeah.
Have a lot of orgasms, because I want to talk strictly in things that I can control.
Fair.
Oh boy. Okay. So yeah, that pretty much is gonna wrap it up for the podcast this week. Before we head out, did either of you want to plug anything? What are y'all working on?
As always, you can find me streaming on Twitch, twitch.tv/DPRLTron. It's all the same on the socials, so you feel comfortable reaching out to me on a social media platform, that's what you'll find me on. So come hang out with me.
And as always, you can't find me, so don't bother.
Mm-hmm. The only hint you'll get, a cave. Good luck, folks.
Indeed.
Well, if you tire of trying to look for Kevin, you can always find me at Bromium404 on YouTube and Bromium wherever you get your social media. And like I mentioned before, if y'all want to join the conversation, feel free to reach out to us at Audible Anomaly on the socials and audibleanomaly@gmail.com. Next week, we are looking at, since it's graduation season, we're looking at a couple of our college stories and stories about schooling and such. So I thought that'd be a very fitting time to kind of do all that, especially since I have my commencement next week. So
Very nice.
So yeah, so we will talk about all of that next week. Hope to see you there. Until then, we've been Audible Anomaly, and take care. Bye!